Dmitry Babich is a political analyst and joins me now live from Moscow. Dmitry, we know that Yevgeny Prigozhin has arrived in Belarus. That was part of that deal for him to live in exile there. What do you think his fate will be? Do you think that he will live out a long life in Belarus?
I think most likely he will just lead a quiet life of someone who was influential but who made a huge mistake and luckily was forgiven. I think that basically the Western media, which expected some kind of a huge battle between Prigozhin and Putin, these people just miscalculated because they have been demonizing Putin for all of the last 23 years. In fact, Putin is very nice to his friends. You know, if someone did a service to him in the past, Putin usually doesn't forget it and helps that person to the best of his abilities. And Prigozhin used to be a friend many years ago. So it was, of course, hard for Putin to suddenly recognize that he became an enemy, that he opposed the president and the state and tried to make a military coup. So, however, Putin is not bloodthirsty. He did not kill Prigozhin, and certainly he will not try to do anything illegal against him when Prigozhin is in Belarus. Why Belarus? Because this is the only country where someone who cannot legally live in Russia live and be in safety, because you know that Prigozhin is under all kinds of sanctions. The West, which again had demonized Prigozhin for several years, suddenly made him almost a hero on Saturday. However, sanctions have not been lifted, so the safest place for him is Belarus.
Why do you think Lukashenko intervened in this rebellion and was willing to accept Prigozhin, given the situation?
I think Lukashenko was asked by someone in the Russian government to do it because he was the ideal negotiator. Lukashenko is pretty neutral in that situation. Let me remind you that Lukashenko even had good relations with the previous president of Ukraine, Poroshenko, Petro Poroshenko, who was very anti-Russian, but Lukashenko managed to preserve good relations with him. That wasn't the case, unfortunately, with Zelensky. And Lukashenko is a pretty good negotiator. Let me remind you that it was he who suggested his mediation services and who brokered the so-called Minsk agreements. Minsk is the capital of Belarus. So it was not his fault that the West and Ukraine did not fulfill Minsk agreements.
Putin says that Wagner was supported entirely by the Russian state to the point of $1 billion. What do you think the future of the Wagner group is looking like, not just in Ukraine, but in parts of Africa, for example, where it's operating in some countries?
I think Putin just doesn't want to make it look like some kind of a conspiracy theory. You know, some people in Russia who are overzealous started saying that Prigozhin and his mutiny were somehow inspired by the West, that they were a product of Western services. That certainly is not the case. Prigozhin went mad by himself. You know, the statements that he made were absolutely insane, but it was because of his excessive power. You know, he had so much cash and he was so successful during Wagner's battles in Africa, later in Syria, and then in Ukraine, that obviously he just lost his position in space. As for the future of Wagner, I think Putin was very clear about that. The work in Africa will continue. Maybe there will be some rebranding. Definitely there will be other people heading these missions. But Russia is not going to leave Africa, and Russia is not going to stop using some sort of private military companies. It's a new practice for Russia. Russia copied that practice from Western countries, but this is the logic of war. If your enemy uses private military companies like Blackwater, you have to do something similar yourself. It's like if your enemy has missiles, you must have missiles. If your enemy has tanks, you must have tanks.
Okay. All right, Dmitry Babich joining us from Moscow. Thank you.
Thank you.